Sam, thank you so much. This picture, for those of you who are either living in the United States or watch news from the United States, really sums up the kind of culture wars that came to the surface during this pandemic. I think at the very beginning, everybody thought, wow, we'll all come together, kind of like after 9/11 with this threat from the outside. And then a funny thing happened. We didn't. And then it seemed to really create deep rifts between us. Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we can decode those and get over them, as well as doing our job. Our job is to bring down some of those fears about, how were vaccines made so quickly and how do they really work? Because, if somebody doesn't really understand what's in a vaccine or how they work, you can't blame them for being a little bit hesitant. I mean, that's just logical. And if in the past it took 11 years to make a vaccine, but only 11 months this time, you can't blame them for worrying about cutting corners unless they understand the difference and how vaccines were made and tested this time. So let's rip through this really quickly. First, this is something called cultural cognition, and I was just talking with Nicholas Christakis. This comes out of Yale from a great scientist named Dan Kahan, not Kahneman, but Kahan, and it's Cultural Cognition Project. And what it does is it maps all of us by a kind of worldview. And what you were seeing amongst those who were very much pushing, do it for society, do it for the vulnerable, were more on the right side of this graph, more communitarian in their view. And those on the left, more individualistic, were either leave me alone, it's none of your business on the bottom left, or more about security and jobs, and don't crush the economy, and don't let the cure be worse than the disease. You will see that in the upper left column. So each of these groups very logically views the world differently and cares about different things. If you just hammer them with a kind of conversion therapy, you are going to fail miserably. There is a better way, and that is reframing the message so that it resonates. Not fooling, not lying, reframing with respect. And so if you look at some of the research we've done, and this is from 2,500 respondents across 50 states in America, look at the difference even in vaccination habits and attitudes based on those worldviews. When you're looking at the blue lines, they're more of the communitarian and egalitarian, that bottom right quadrant. When you're looking at the red lines, they're more of the hierarchical and the individualists. And so it is very different in behavior tied to identity and tied to worldviews. And coming back to them, looking at the percentages amongst these 2,500, you can see amongst those identifying as more egalitarian, and it's a very implicit test. We don't say, are you egalitarian? Of course not. But very much larger group than the hierarchicals. And by the same token, you look at the communitarians, and a much larger group of communitarians get vaccinated. And if you look at those who reject, you see the same patterns. Much higher rejections in the hierarchical and the individualistic. So if we can decode people with empathy, with respect, we can do a better job of meeting them where they are. But how do you do that? Well, the way you can do it in a way that makes sense to them is to gain a schema, a frame of reference. What do they know? Do they play sports? Do they know pop culture? And so I took a stab at this. Here's how you could explain how the different vaccines work, because they do work differently depending on the vaccine, using Star Wars. First, imagine the virus. The big bad coronavirus is Darth Vader. And this vaccine is using little tiny pieces of the virus, not the whole virus, just enough. Let's pretend for a moment it's just the empty helmet of Darth Vader. Well, that empty helmet is not going to kill you. And in this case, not going to give you coronavirus, but it will be enough to train a Jedi Knight to defend himself. And you see he's holding that nice antibody instead of a lightsaber. So again, the takeaway on this is if you break the virus down into tiny fragments, it's not enough to harm you, but it's enough to train the body into being a Jedi Knight. Next, you can use a weakened form of the virus. It's kind of like putting a baby in a Darth Vader costume. It's enough to train the body, but not enough to make you sick or get COVID. Next, you can use a different virus as a kind of taxi and hitch a ride into the cells. Next, you can use this new from Pfizer and Moderna mRNA. And what is that? It's really like an instruction kit. Imagine if you got all of the parts from IKEA with no manual to put it together. Well, that's your body with this virus. It needs a manual. And so what does mRNA do? It doesn't mess with your DNA. It just has like a snapshot, a very quick message of instruction to your cells, how to make those little Darth Vader helmets that'll train your body into being a Jedi fighter. And then it disappears. So if you want to look to use sports, you can talk about cricket and how you're defending the wicket. And you need those antibodies that are made with the vaccine to defend the wicket. Or if you're looking at basketball, it's like a terrific defender. You see the defending vaccine on the right. Or if you're looking at football, soccer, it's about an amazing goalkeeper who keeps those viruses from actually docking with your cell. And that's how they reproduce. So you keep them out of the cell. So when somebody wonders about how they were made so rapidly this time, first use an analogy. In the past, making a vaccine took 11 years because it was a long, expensive relay race. And you didn't want to waste money if the first runner fell down and stumbled in the relay race. You wanted to make sure they got to you. But this time, to speed things up, it was more like a marathon start. They lined up everybody at the line and said, go. And that meant all the trials went simultaneously. But the trials were still rigorous. They were still tens of thousands of people. They just ran the race in a very different way. And then the new technologies that we have allowed us to really speed things up. The mRNA is almost like making a Spotify playlist. It's not like growing a virus over a decade. And then finally, we took the risk out of it. We said to pharma companies, hey, we will fund it and we will buy the vaccines with government taxpayer money. And so this took the risk out of everybody getting into the game. So with that, I'd like to hand it back and hope that you can really challenge yourself to use really understandable analogies. This is the key to behavioral science. It's not just what we know, it's how we communicate it, and that ultimately drives effectiveness. Sam.